Oh, okay, I just want to say, we're still, as a group, we're working out all the details of how to make this more successful, ranging from how to moderate it, how to keep lists, and how to deal with questions about anonymity and things like that. So we're a work in progress. We all have always been a work in progress, and that's what we do. So bear with us. But for those of you who are new to the topic, my name is Gene Rule. I'm one of the group of volunteers that keep this program going. And it's a project of the Institute for the Critical Study of Society at the Nebel Proctor Marxist Library, which was formed about 15 years ago to further the library's goals of preserving our written heritage, as well as supporting emerging struggles for racial and gender equality and for socialism. And we are active in different aspects of people's struggles in the Bay Area and globally. Some of us are affiliated with specific political parties and tendencies, others are not. We respect each other, but do not necessarily agree on all issues. Therefore, the opinions expressed by our speakers and our workshops and publications are those of the speakers and authors only and do not represent a group consensus on the issues discussed. We are united, however, in our respect for the work of Karl Marx and our belief that his work will remain as important for the class struggles of the future as they have been for the past. And as a group, we continue to draw inspiration from the work of Karl Marx, including his 11th thesis on Feuerbach. The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point is to change it. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Richard will be giving us an overview. And is Raj going to moderate, or?
I'd be happy to, unless somebody else
Does anyone else? We should be. You're going to be moderating the next three, aren't you, Raj?
I will do what you like, Gene.
Okay. Well, does anybody, Alan?
Yeah, maybe good today to Alan to do it. I think that would be a good idea for Alan to do it. Is Alan around? He was here. Alan,
I am here.
Do the
can you hear me?
moderation?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can do it.
Okay. So I'm through until we're going to go for about a brief introduction, and then we'll move to Q&A and comments. And at some point, we'll take a break and remind people that we need money, but we'll do that later. So over to Raj or Alan?
Alan.
Oh, well, can somebody do the introduction for the session? I haven't been in on the planning, so that would be good. Raj?
Yeah, okay. So Richard Fallenbaum, who's been a member of our group for a long time, has offered to do a talk, and he has done presentations before in the library, and is part of the committee that administers this program, has agreed to do a general description of the revolutionary organizations in the United States. So I do not want to take much of his time and go more into detail, so I'll hand it over to Richard, and then Alan, you please moderate this discussion. Thank you.
Okay, Raj, I'll dive right into it. First I suggested this topic a few weeks ago, and you may be wondering why, which is this topic, which is Marx's revolutionary organizations in the United States. And I was thinking, the ICSS takes a nonpartisan position, so it doesn't really comment on different organizations. But the problem is, we can't be Marxists without without action, as as Marx said in the thesis of Feuerbach. We have to do something to change it, and organization of the working class is key to that. For Marx and Lenin, organization was central. In the Communist Manifesto, Marx and Engels referred to the Communist Party even before there was a Communist Party. And they worked with emerging revolutionary organizations throughout their careers and their lives. Even though they were not always revolutionary or not fully developed. Lenin put forward the idea of a new type of revolutionary organization, a party of the new type in Russia, consisting of professional revolutionaries who were highly trained and theoretically advanced cadre, able to function politically in all sorts of situations. On the other hand, Marx refrained from participating in much party politics during periods when conditions seemed unpromising, and devoted himself to theoretical work. And Lenin also would not participate in émigré party politics. In the advanced, quote unquote, democratic capitalist countries, the underground party of the new type was superseded by the mass Communist Party, which theoretically consisted of a cadre corps in the Lenin manner, with a non-professional mass membership. And this was sort of not a very stable arrangement. It was a very awkward form of organization, but it was quite, important in most of the capitalist countries, and did important work. But these kind of mass communist parties have almost completely disappeared. Anyway, I think I want to make a brief comment, diversion. I think the revolutionary movement is in a kind of impasse at the present time. That the revolutionary organizations, the revolutionary communist parties, don't have a mass impact, or even an impact on the political life of society. And of course, the main reason for that is the objective factors, which are the nature of society, the aggressive capitalist resistance to revolution, and the lull in the revolutionary movement, which may be starting to change. But at the same time, there is subjective and factors within the revolutionary movement itself, which I think there's a theoretical deficit in the revolutionary parties in the United States. One, on a global level, I don't think there is an understanding of the nature of the confrontation between Russia and China on one hand, and the imperialist bloc on the other hand. And I think that reflects a theoretical deficit. And also there is, in my view, there is not a understanding or formulation of the dynamics of capitalism, U.S. capitalism in particular at this point. But that's just my opinion, and I don't want to belabor that. And even so, it's still, I think it's worth looking at the U.S. parties, even though I consider they have many failures and weaknesses. it's important to draw some lessons. They've done important work. I'm always astonished by the sincerity and hard work and sacrifice of members of these organizations. And even though most of them are very small, I don't consider that something against them. And somebody asked me if I could speak on the relative sizes of these different organizations. And I really can't, but I'm not sure it's that important. I just want to say I once belonged to an organization of 4 people, and revolutionary organization, and we thought we were pretty important. So I think even a 4-person organization can be, can be significant. And but we need to ask. We need to ask some questions about the existing parties. But one point I want to make is that we'll ask the question: why are there so many of them? And do we need so many? And maybe we can discuss that in the discussion period. And second thing, I want to point out that I'm basing my description of the parties on an article in Wikipedia, which has a list of all the parties that seem to exist, but it's very incomplete. And one of the reasons is that there are clandestine parties which we don't know about. So that's one factor. But the other factor is that there seems to be, as Max Fallenbaum said, there seems to be a generational factor of work, that there are parties of the pre-1960s, there are parties of the 60s. Max Fallenbaum in his book, Revolution in the Air, has 2 or 3 pages of organizations that were part of the new communist movement that came and went. And I've never heard of them. And it's probably there are organizations that are formed that are revolutionary among millenniums. And there's sort of a segregation among generations, so that people of my generation know certain groups, certain subset of organizations, and don't know anything about any others. At any rate, there's some questions that we want to interrogate these parties when we talk about them. What is their strategy and theoretical outlooks? How do they develop strategies? How do they train their members? How do they support themselves financially? How do they select mass activities to work in? And how do they protect themselves from repression? We're in a period where it seems like there isn't much repression of communist organizations, but that's sort of illusory. Any organization that starts to get significant or starts to have some impact will invite repression, quite often violent repression. So it's certainly an issue for. And the other thing I want to mention is that besides parties, I think there are revolutionary organizations or Marxist organizations that are important. We should mention the Marxist educational centers and research centers. Institute for the Critical Study of Society is one. The Marxist Study Center in Boston is another that I know of. This Platypus organization, national organization, I think they're important, while not directly revolutionary action organizations. they move towards that, and they're publishing houses that are not connected particularly with organizations such as Verso, Monthly Review Press, Haymarket Press, and so on. And there are independent blogs, the Black Agenda Report, World Socialist website, Jacobin, so on, that we should take and how do they fit in? How do these organizations fit in? So, it's a question of what form the revolutionary organization should take in the current period. Okay, so that said, I want to just do a quick run through of the various organizations that I know about, and I'm hoping that people will add to the list, and even add to the list in Wikipedia. I think, a lot of organizations nobody knows about except the FBI, and that should be more well known. At any rate, the Wikipedia in an article called "The American Left" divides the American left into several categories. Marxism-Leninism is one, and the mother party of Marxism-Leninism is the Communist Party, which goes back to the Bolshevik Revolution. And I won't say much about that at this point. Aligned close to the Communist Party is the Committees of Correspondence, CCDS, for Democracy and Socialism, which is the most recent split off of the Communist Party. Then there's the American Party of Labor, which is part of what are called Marxist-Leninist parties, an international sort of grouping of Marxist-Leninist parties. This one is aligned with the Hoxha. I don't know if that's correct, the former leader of Albania. Okay, next, Freedom Road Socialist Organization, which is actually, there are two Freedom Socialist organizations with the same name, which was a split between the original Freedom Socialist Organization. Workers' World Party, which originally started as a Trotskyist organization, but sort of shed that, and that's now divided into the Workers' World Party and Party of Socialism and Liberation. The Revolutionary Communist Party, which started in the Bay Area and is most closely associated with the name of Bob Avakian, and who developed his own extension of Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, called the New Synthesis of Communism. Okay, that's what I have right now for Marxist-Leninist parties. Then there are Trotskyist parties, which many of them are associated with the Fourth International Organization. The Freedom Socialist Party, which was a Seattle-based split-off of the Socialist Workers' Party. The Socialist Tendency, which I just heard about, which somebody will probably talk about. The ISO, the International Socialist Organization, which actually dissolved about a year ago, but I mention it because it did quite a lot of work educationally, and its party press still exists, the Haymarket Press, and it's quite, it's a serious press. Anyway, Socialist Action, which is headquartered in San Francisco, also associated with the Fourth International. I think Jeff Mackler is the best known leader of that. The Socialist Alternative, another Trotskyist organization, which is associated with a part of an international group called the International Socialist Alternative. And they're best known for electing Kshama Sawant to the Seattle City Council. That's I'm not sure she's a member, but she was their candidate. The Socialist Equality Party, I'm not sure it still exists, but it's also a split off from the Workers' World Party, and it's affiliated with the World Socialist website, which does some important work. Then, of course, the mother party of Trotskyist organization in the United States is the Socialist Workers' Party. And I'm not sure how active it is anymore, but I think it still exists. Solidarity, which is a descendant of IS, International Socialist. Incidentally, the Trotskyist organizations, the permutations, the splits are much more, they're very complicated and numerous, and I can't even go into that. Next is the Spartacist League, which publishes the newspaper Workers' Vanguard and is a part of the Fourth International. The International Marxist Tendency, which is a US section of an international grouping, not necessarily the Fourth International. And finally, there's a group that is not mentioned in Wikipedia. That's the News and Letters Committees, which has had a lot of, has been involved for a long time with ICSS, and it publishes a newsletter, and it was associated with the name of Raya Dunayevskaya, who was at certain times the secretary to Trotsky, and they have a brand of Marxism called Marxist humanism, and we should talk about it. Maybe somebody will talk about it. And finally, that we want to hold on just a second. I have to turn off this phone. Okay, I'm sorry. And then there's Wikipedia also talks about democratic socialism, which of course is the Socialist Party and its offshoots, the Social Democrats and Democratic Socialists of America, which has existed for a long time, but basically has become a new organization with an influx of a lot of members in the last 4 or 5 years. And I think DSA, and it's maybe more revolutionary than the original Socialist Party, more Marxist oriented. They're associated with, what was it, Jacobin magazine. And finally, there's the Green Party. You know, one can consider them revolutionary or not, and anarchism, which I'm not going to talk about at all, but there are anarchist organizations, and they should be considered. At any rate, I think it's important to take all these organizations seriously and look at them and draw lessons from their activities and their work and so forth. So that's my presentation, and please, contribute. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. So should we open it up now for Q&A, or Jean, did you want to say anything before we do, or how do you want to do that?
I have lots to say, but I just would like to be put on the stack at some point. But thank you very much, Richard. That was excellent coverage of what is really very confusing here. And so I see we do have some members of organization here, including my friend CT from the Peace and Freedom Party. So, anyway, so why don't we, I would say go to comment, questions and answers.
Just directly to the Q&A. Huh? Okay. Okay, here's how I'd like to do it. This is Alan, I'm going to moderate the Q&A session. I was wondering, Mehmet, if we could get somebody to do the timing on the time limitations on the speakers, because it's hard for me to monitor the stack and stay on top of how long people are speaking. But I will call on people based on raising your hand in the participant section. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, if you click on the icon at the bottom of the Zoom window, it will list all the participants, and you can raise your hand from that window. And I will try to keep track of who has their hand raised and let you know basically who's in line to speak. Please keep your comments to 2 minutes. And just also please keep in mind that it's a little difficult at times to moderate these sessions because there's a lot going on. And I'm not trying to keep anybody out or whatever, but I may miss somebody. In any case, we'll try to give everybody their chance to speak. So if people would raise their hands, and right now I have Jean and
that's Elazar on the phone.
And Elazar. Thank you, Mehmet. Can somebody do the 2 minutes?
Yes, I can do it if you want.
Thank you very much, Mehmet. Okay, so let's see, Jean, do you want to go ahead? You're already unmuted. So, and then Elazar will be next.
Okay, excellent. I'll start by saying that I am not now, nor have I ever been, a member of the Communist Party. But I will also say that I was on the verge of joining about around 1990 when the whole world Marxist movement came apart, and so that ended. And I'm also very close to Workers' World /PSL, and that's another organization. Were I to join a party, it would be very high on my list. Right now, I used to be in Peace and Freedom, left to join, I started Burning back in 2015, and see, the Burners are very interesting, the Burning movement. And there's numerous questions about them, but I'll say one thing, even after they, DSA, even after they, after Bernie left the electoral struggle or his campaign, they've refused to join. They're not being sheepdogs. They're not joining the Biden business. And I was watching the disturbances last night, and I was struck by one woman who had a Bernie 2020 t-shirt on, which I found very interesting, that the DSA people are involved with this kind of thing. But I was struck by her sign, which said, she was a white woman, but she had this sign that said, "White silence is white violence." And I was struck by that idea. So I'm looking forward to hearing people from different groups, supporting different groups, and seeing what else we have to say. The last thing I want to say is just remind people this is a global struggle. And, and we have to consider the relations of what's going on here in the United States with other global groups.
2 minutes.
So as everybody knows, I feel very positive towards Xi Jinping, but and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, it's 2.5 minutes now. All right.
Okay. Next speaker is Elazar, and following that is Michael K. So Elazar, if you want to go ahead.
Elazar, you need to unmute yourself. Yes, I think much better.
I'm unmuted now. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. There's a whole section of the movement that I don't necessarily support that was left out. That is the anti-revisionist movement, progressive labor that came out, originated from groups that were in POC. There was a organization to form, a provisional organization to form a new Communist Party. and many came into progressive labor. And then there was a whole Maoist anti-revisionist movement that I don't necessarily agree with, but I think they shouldn't be neglected. So I want to talk about the Spartacist League and the Bolshevik tendency that came out of a split of the Spartacist League. I was, for about a year, I was a member of the Bolshevik tendency. I had earlier been a member of the Socialist Workers' Party, and before that, of the Labor Youth League section of the Communist Party. So I've had a long history. The revolutionary movement should do something revolutionary. And so what the Bolshevik tendency did is they formed the United Front with the Communist Party, headed by Leo Robinson of Local 10, Longshore. And at Pier 80, they stopped the unloading of the anti-apartheid South African cargo from the Ned Lloyd Kimberley, and they kept this action going for 11 days. And when Mandela was freed and came to the United States on his visit and spoke at the Oakland Stadium, he paid tribute to that action of international class solidarity and said it helped kickstart and inspire the anti-apartheid movement yet again in South Africa. The Spartacist League and the Bolshevik tendency and the internationalist group in Portland, at least centered there, are considered by most Trotskyist groups as Stalinist. Why? Because first of all, they defended the worker state, all of them, all the post-revolutionary worker states, to the last moment. They called for unconditional military support. During the war, real Trotsky, Second World War, real Trotskyists went on the dangerous Murmansk run to make sure the Soviet Union got military help.
2 minutes and 20 seconds. They never crossed the
class line. How long do I have?
You just passed 2 minutes. Just wrap it up. Yeah.
I'll close right now just saying that, so these three groups are ironclad, hard Trotskyist groups that support defense of the worker state. That includes China right now, North Korea, and there are many so-called communist groups that do not defend their rights of these countries. And we do. Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.
Okay. Before we go on, I just want to say, people, please raise your hand if people have questions. Go ahead and get in the queue. Raise your hand on the participants window.
I think Raj also has his hand up.
Oh, I don't see. Let me see. It's at the bottom or something?
Since he's a co-host, he cannot raise hand from the computer. Yeah.
Okay. So next is Michael K. and then Raj will be speaking. So Mehmet, I will handle the unmuting and muting. You can just focus on the timing.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So Michael, you want to go ahead?
Thank you. I just have two questions. What is a Trotskyist? What is a Leninist? Trotsky died 80 years ago. There have been many, many, many different kinds of organizations that called themselves Trotskyists. What unites them all, or is it just a name that carries on for 80 years? Lenin died 100 years ago. Obviously, the CPUSA, you could say, is a Leninist organization because it evolved out of the Russian Revolution and the spread of the Comintern around the world. But what makes a Leninist organization today? What are these names? Why are they relevant in 2020? That's my question.
Good question.
Okay, Richard, would you like to comment first on that? If that's a question that's posed to the group, but.
No, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, not particularly. I mean, I think it becomes, it's always pretty fluid. I think there's Leninist organizations, and they're learning from, and there's on the other side, learning from Lenin, reading and the understanding and the scientific contributions he made, but which are sort of often different things. And I don't know, frankly, I don't know much about Trotsky, so I have to pass on that.
Okay. I can also suggest that if other people raise your hands, if you want to address Michael's questions or comments, you're welcome to. So, but people could raise their hands, that would be great. Michael, do you have anything else that you want to add?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right. So next is Raj. Let me unmute, ask you to unmute, Raj.
Okay, sorry, you can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So as Elazar mentioned, Progressive Labor Party was, I think, left out. So Elazar mentioned that's also a part of this revolutionary groups that Richard mentioned. They are, by the way, organizing at 1:30 p.m. a car procession to protest the killing of George Floyd at Oakland West Assembly. Oakland West part is the assembly point at 1:30, and then it's in the East Bay. Now, I wanted to actually answer, or at least say something about what was a question about what is a Leninist. Leninist, I think, and I talked on May 2nd on Lenin's legacy. So I would just say that the important thing for a Leninist party is that it believes in overthrow of capitalism. It believes in struggle towards that, and it believes that the working class becomes the master of society and begins to build socialism. It destroys bourgeoisie and in all its forms, and that it cannot compromise, such as the compromise that we see in China with capitalism. So that's what my definition would be. Now, how to do it would not be. So these are the fundamental of Leninism. Also, Lenin defined imperialism, which is a stage, economic essence, a stage of capital, which has become moribund and is a monopoly capitalism. Such a stage was in Lenin's lifetime, that I think somewhat degraded in the economic sense after the Second World War, but reasserted itself by 1970s. And it is definitely in that stage, at least the stage Lenin talked about, although in different form, not colonial possessions, but more economic strangulation of the world. So this is how I would say Leninism is. There's no compromise.
Past 2 minutes, Raj.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That's enough for me to say what I wanted to say.
Okay, so next, Norma, did you bring your hand down? If you want to unmute, I'll unmute you. Did you had your hand up, but I lost you.
Yeah, well, I've been thinking about the orthodoxy of the 2 minutes without there being much input into this conversation. And when, for example, oh God, I was having one of those blocks, the man from wherever.
Do you want me to put you back
from out of town? The fellow, we all know, Elazar. It just didn't come. He could have gone on a bit and added substance to this discussion, and the 2 minute rule didn't allow that to happen. I think you might, the whole crowd might take into consideration that we would like to let the ability of the people available to extend their participation so that we have material. I mean, interrupting people who are saying something at the end of 2 minutes, I think goes against what we need to do.
Okay, Mehmet, probably keep that in mind. Next up is Mehmet and then Gary. Mehmet?
Okay. All right, thanks. I think as Marxists, first of all, we are in the business of changing the world. And the way that Marx envisioned was revolutionary. So yes, we do have revolutionary, as Marxists, we have to be revolutionaries. but the way that we want to change the world, it differs. That is dependent on how we analyze the country that we are in, if that's what we are looking at for a revolution. I believe that the organizations, the revolutionary organizations, can be classified not according to their name or, Trotskyist, this, that, but instead of it, how they analyze the system and how they are planning on changing it. That is the theory of their revolution. What kind of a revolution are they thinking about, which will determine how they are organized? If you are thinking about a mass workers' party, of course, you are not going to be organizing, underground. If you're thinking about, let's say, an armed insurrection, then it's going to be different. If you are analyzing that the world or your allies are going to be, I'm making this, peasants, then you're going to organize more in a different type of an organization, which means that you're for a different type of revolution, which means that your organization is going to be organized differently. So I think it would be helpful if people can contribute to this on why is such and such party organized this way, because their vision of change, that is the revolution, is this way, and that's why they are organized around, this or that. But I had proposed that in ICSS, we should have long sessions, I think, about the theory of revolution, which will put more light to this subject. Thank you very much.
Good. Okay, next speaker is Gary, followed by Roger Harris. Gary, you're unmuted, so you can speak.
Sure. I'm just going to be very brief. On the Zoom group chat, I just posted stuff from the Marxist.org website about the history of the anti-revisionist wing of the communist movement since the end of World War II. And it's a lot of material, so if you're going to go into it, strap in for the ride. That's all I have to say.
Okay. So does everybody know how to access that? You go to the chat icon at the bottom of the screen and you click on it, and that opens up a window. And then if you scroll to Gary's entry, which is a little ways up, there's an underlined blue link that you click on to get to it. So you can go ahead. So next speaker is Roger, followed by Norma. And I'm asking people, if you have comments, chime in. Otherwise, I'm going to start calling on people. So why don't you go ahead, Roger? I'll unmute you.
Thank you for muting me. Okay, in 2 minutes, I just want to raise a few themes, 4 themes, because it's hard to go over something in two minutes, but themes I think that are important to reflect upon when we're talking about political parties, and in this case, leftist revolutionary parties. One thing is that if we look at the composition of almost all the parties that we see today in the United States, almost without exception, these parties are parties of intellectuals. And they could be from the sort of extreme left in that spectrum to the extreme right, but they're all mainly intellectuals. About 100 years ago, all the political left parties were predominantly drawing from the working class, from blue-collar workers in particular. So there's been a shift in the last century about that. So that's something that is worth analyzing. Another theme I think that's important to understand is where political parties come from. Political parties don't just sort of spontaneously arise and then they call for revolution and then the people follow them and there's a successful revolution. It's actually a dialectical process, but more the other way around, that the political parties come out of the mass movement. So a very important theme that I think that needs to be addressed is, where is the mass movement? And why is it at the particular strength that it is, leading to a third theme, which is looking at the balance of class forces and the relative strength of the progressive forces, the oppressed people versus the bourgeoisie. And finally, I wanted to just comment on the question that Richard mentioned is, why are there so many parties? And do we need that many parties? Well, the reason why there's so many parties is because there's lots of different political lines. But that only explains the sort of epiphenomenal part of that. The reason why there's so many political lines is that there's many different interests. We live in a multi-class society, and parties
More than 2 minutes.
reflect the different class interests. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the next speaker, I'm going to jump ahead to Sharon because she hasn't spoken yet. And then following that will be Norma, Jean, and then Michael, unless somebody.
Raj also raises his hand. Raj raises his hand.
Oh, okay, so I'll note that too. Okay, so Sharon, do you mind going, would you go next, please?
Sure. I have a couple of comments. I've always been bothered about the way in which Lenin's collective works are kind of used as a kind of a Bible. You know, the guy was not, the guy was a great intellectual and a great leader and one of the most important people of the 20th century. But he shouldn't be used as a Bible. And in particular, he said something, he had a position which was proven to be wrong historically, which was that the liberation of the most oppressed people, the people who he, you know, whose economies were being completely thwarted in development by imperialism, their liberation was going to be based on the revolutions that happened in the most developed countries. So he said that the third world, if you want to use that expression, was going to be liberated after the people of the most advanced countries. And he was wrong. Historically, we've seen that. And a person who stood up and said that he told him he was wrong was Ho Chi Minh in the 1920s. And I think that we should talk about that history in some detail. There are people in the communist movement who to this day reject that notion, fail to see that in the third world there are socialism has been established in quite a few different places, and reject the whole notion that nationalism can be progressive. And I think that would be worth a lot of study also. There's all kinds of American exceptionalism. And it's all based on, you know, that we're the most democratic, we have all these democratic institutions, blah, blah, blah. I think we should reject American exceptionalism and look at
more than 2 minutes.
Revolution actually happens. People do not give up their lives easily. People do not give up the lives of their children for the future of their grandchildren easily. People's backs have to be against the wall. The government can't govern anymore, and the people can't tolerate it anymore. And that takes a lot. We should think about all of that when we glibly say, oh, we just need a real revolutionary party. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to jump Octave to the front here because he hasn't spoken yet, and then followed by Norma. So Octave, would you mind?
Sure, yeah. For you folks who don't know, I was talking to Jean last night and suggesting that we try to weave in the current events around the racial uprising, if you can call it that, with your topic. So I'm interested in number one, which of these tendencies, what does Marxism have to contribute to African Americans uprising? I have my own ideas, but I'd be interested in some of you folks who have read a lot more Marx than I have. And which tendency is really reaching out to African Americans and Latinos, people of color? And if not, why not? What is the split all about? And are the Marxists just going to remain a kind of a fringe, marginal group? Are they going to try to integrate themselves into what's actually happening on the ground, especially around some of the racial, economic issues, which you really can't separate the racial issue from economic issues. So I know that's a lot to put on the table, but I like to invite several people, maybe in a series, several people to share their ideas about that.
Okay, let me just pause for a second and say that what I would really like to do is maybe make this a little bit more of a discussion. And I think Octave just opened the door for that in a very good way. And so we have people who have their hands up to make comments, but can I just take a quick pause? I want to try something if you guys don't mind. Can somebody try to respond to his questions so this isn't just one after the other, so we can get a little bit more discussion going here? So does anybody have something that they want to address specifically to Octave in response to his questions and comments? Okay, Gene, I can't, people, we should have two types of hands up, but I would prefer actually if you could raise your hand. So Gene, why don't you go ahead and
no, I have my other hand raised too.
Yeah, you have.
Hands raised.
Yeah.
But I Octave called me last night, and he got me thinking, and I started watching the news to try to see, well, who is actually out there? And it's kind of hard. I watch my emails because I get, as everybody else does, 200,000 emails a day. I try to check, well, who is commenting on this? What political lines have commented on what's going on there? And I mentioned the fact that people in DSA, what everyone may think about their theoretical outlook, is they're deeply involved in what's going on. And they're, out there taking food to people in Minneapolis that need food and things like that. So they're deeply involved in this. And as I say, I did see that one woman wearing a Bernie shirt, but that's all in the last 12 hours. So I'm still trying to make sense of it myself. But I thank Octave for raising this question. And thank you for handling it this way, Alan.
Alan put me on the list.
Raj, why don't you go ahead, since if you can comment on Octave.
Yeah, right. I think it's a very burning question of the day. Is literally buildings are burning. The right wing and the president have called Antifa. So obviously they'll see as the most potent force that's arrayed against the state and the right wing is Antifa. Antifa fought with these people, and the police are part. I wouldn't be surprised if many of these police officers who have done this kind of heinous killing are not actually part of some right-wing underground association like Berlin police had, when Rosa Luxemburg was murdered. So I think Antifa is the leading edge, the anarchists, but they are the leading edge right now. The Marxists are not in that because the young people are attracted towards that, and not Marxism, because Marxism is seen as a wave of the past. So I think there is this difficulty that the American working class, when it was being hurt for 40 years, went to the right because the left, Marxist left, was unable to capture their grievances. For whatever reason, the state in the United States has really succeeded in describing Marxism as bad, and the symbol of that is Stalin. And that's why Stalin is continuously written on and described as such. And in the end, I want to ask Sharon, please put it on the chat, the reference, because what I know and read of Lenin, it surprises me that Lenin would say that to Ho Chi Minh, because Lenin's anticipation of the next revolution was India, not China. So with that, I end my comment.
Okay, Octave, do you have any comments? Just again, I'm trying to make this a bit of a conversation back and forth, and then I'm going to call on people. And again, I'd like to ask people who want to speak directly to this, and then I'll move on to the general comments. But Octave, do you want to just make a quick response? Let me unmute you.
There was one point that was raised, and it's kind of a detail, but my understanding is that a lot of the police departments have been infiltrated by Nazis and Klansmen and white supremacists. And I think Raj mentioned something that was a parallel in the times of Rosa Luxemburg, some underground organization. Is that what you had in mind, Raj?
Yes. I think the right wing in the United States, as many countries, find sympathetic these police people types, and some of them probably are actively or naturally, because that's their why you join the police from working class is you're devoid of power, and the white police officers exert their power through this kind of violence. And the easiest prey for that is African Americans, but people of color in general, African Americans in particular. So I wouldn't be surprised if somebody did research on Chauvin and his 3 police officers were standing there who saw this murder committed and were perfectly at peace with themselves. So to me, this is a symbol. No wonder the whole world has erupted. So I think there might be links there, and even if it's not, they're natural allies. I can't say that they are, it has to be a link. It is a mindset that's common.
Okay. Okay, well, yeah, that's helpful. And well, I don't know if people want to talk about, well, what is to be done about the police?
Okay, let me try to, I want to try to not push the people who are already in the queue back too far. Alazar, you've had your hand up for a while. Do you want, I'm sorry, Norma is first. Norma, did you want to make a comment about some of this?
Well, now they've raised an issue that directly relates to what's being tried to be discussed, and that is 3 of the police, 3 others of the police were filmed also standing on this fellow on Floyd's back. So the other 3 are being indicted for similar cause of the of what's going on. They're not being ignored at any rate. The thing I had been trying to put into this conversation, somebody talked about the way they described the advancement of the socialist struggle was something they said you have an overthrow. I'm sure the person didn't mean it just exclusively as I'm reporting it back, but they did say that you had an overthrow of capitalism and then you establish socialist structure. And of course, I think we all think that as we begin the struggle, which all of us have been doing, and in fact, the country has leaned in a socialist direction since its inception, with its establishment of, for example, libraries, or even streets have been named as being socialist. The events that serve the general population have been long established as kind of belonging to, for example, the whole state or even the whole country. We have federal roads as well. So there are establishments that belong to the people. Our work, and that precedes the socialist revolution, the overthrow of the government, is what I'm saying. We're not going to get the overthrow without an understanding by us mass, many of whom are not intellectuals, but come to the theories because of their participation or whatever influences them, their grandfather was moved in this direction.
2 minutes, past 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you, yes, of course. I'm
Okay.
saying something, and so I'm going to finish saying what I'm saying so that we can
Okay,
continue
so
to have the,
I think,
continue to,
let me
continue to
move on. We have several people that have their
Right,
hands up. Let
right.
me go ahead.
I'm sure that the next 30 seconds won't ruin the
Okay, let's see. I just want to let people know where things are on the stack. Elazar will be next, and then other people who have their
that the
hands up.
building of the socialist struggle has long begun, and we have to recognize it and advance it through an overthrow of capitalism. It's not that the sequence has to be seen differently.
Okay, so next is Elazar, and following that, we have other people who have their hands up, including Michael and Jean. I know you also have your hand up. So, and I'd encourage some of the people who haven't spoken to also please raise your hand and speak. So, Elazar, are you still there and wish to speak? I think that's 138.
Yeah, yes, it is. He needs to unmute yourself, Elazar.
I don't show him as, yes, I'll unmute him. Oop.
Yeah,
Can you
there
hear
you go.
me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear me now? First of all, there's too much comments between the people who are called on. So we need to go right to the people who have something to say. First of all, I thought what Octave said was a breath of fresh air and extremely important. And the signal is Trump literally called for shooting some of these people. Now, the looting and the vandalism is counterproductive, and we know that. Plenty of it is probably agents provocateurs. It was here in Oakland. So what we did in the Oscar Grant Committee, we had our march when he was murdered in cold blood, we had Longshore with their marching team providing security, so no punk actions no car windows could be broken, no bank windows, nothing that would destroy our movement in the eyes of the public. This is a big, important fight. So I agree with Octave that this is something that the left needs to take up. Then I want to go to another matter. There are a lot of so-called Trotskyist movements, and most of them are worthless. The same thing happened in the anti-revisionist movement. Most of the Maoist groups became first Maoists without a country, then they imploded and disappeared from sight. There's hundreds of names. Someone once made up like an affinity chart, similar to, like what's that crazy idea that the planets tell your life. They made an astrology chart of the Maoists. But the point is, what we need now is regroupment. We need revolutionary united fronts. We shouldn't say that because someone is a Stalinist, someone is a Maoist, someone is a Trotskyist, that they shouldn't unite to fight real fascists, not putative fascists from charges 100 years ago, but white racist murderers. So we need united fronts. We don't need invidious stabbing in the back of each other. We need regroupment, and we need to march together. Now that is crucial. And up here, there's a young group, fresh kids,
2 minutes.
20 years old. Can I have 10 seconds, 15
Yes,
seconds?
Go ahead.
Okay, there's a young group of 20-year-olds that call themselves communists. They were doing high school things like hippity hoppity, abolish private property. They came out of DSA. They took over the DSA local up here, and they defined themselves as communists. And they're serious. We need to realize that this is a period where this pandemic has produced geopolitical crises for the system, and we must move forward together. Thank you so much, comrades.
Thank you. Next is
Sounds like a
Jean,
speech.
followed by Michael. Jean, are you ready to speak up?
I'm always ready to speak up.
Okay.
Too much.
Go ahead.
I was just, last night, I caught a speech by the mayor of Minneapolis. And what he was saying is the black-white antagonism, the tension between the races is the fundamental contradiction in American society today. And I found that very interesting because if you look out there, I mean, there's another black kid just said, I just graduated from high school. And it seems like every year there is this political ritual we go through. A cop kills a black guy, we have big demonstrations and it goes back to normal. A cop kills a black guy, we have big demonstrations and we're not going back to normal. And he says, this year we're not going back to normal. There is no normal we're going back to, which is very striking, I think. And the other thing that I found very interesting was this was a multiracial demonstration. I saw a lot of white people there. I not very good at counting, but white people are coming out in supporting this very strongly, and there's a lot of opposition to the cops. And you can see the way they're burning these police vans. So something new is happening here, or might be happening. I think we ought to pay very close attention to this. And again, if we're members of discipline groups, you know, I was struck by the fact that DSA does seem to be out there, and they've never claimed to be a Leninist group. So, but those are just my comments.
Okay, Michael K is next on the list. And other people, please raise your hand. We want people to speak up. Those of you who, especially who haven't participated, please raise your hand. But Michael, you want to go ahead?
Thank you. Yes, we living in historic, absolutely historic times. It is brand new. In addition to what Jean just said about the rise of people against the cops, there is also massive unemployment now, like we've never seen before. And there's this pandemic, which is affecting people psychologically as well as physically. I'd like to comment on something Roger said. He said that there were intellectuals now in the revolutionary movement, as unlike 100 years ago. I would just suggest that all of these intellectuals are working class, because the people going to college have been devastated economically since 2008. Before 2008, college people were able to make it, but after 2008, college people, like everybody else, are having a hard time. I think it is a multinational movement against the cops, and that's very, very important. And I think that DSA is a big tent organization. It has a lot of Marxist leadership, but it also has anarchist leadership. And finally, I would say that more and more people are recognizing, especially liberal Democrats, are recognizing that these demonstrations that liberal Democrats support, these demonstrations are being infiltrated by the right wing, and right wing people are doing a lot of the burning and a lot of the destruction of small businesses up and down the streets in order to try to start a civil race war. That's their ideology, and that's what they're doing. So much of the damage and destruction is being done undercover by right-wingers within a massive, we have never seen this before, uprising of people. That's it, thanks.
Okay, Richard, why don't you go ahead?
Well, I think the question was raised: what is the Marxist view of this? And I think the Marxist view is that these uprisings have to be viewed in a class context. The mayor is wrong. The fundamental contradiction in the United States is not race; it's class. And even the fundamental, we have to put it all in social context. There are these individual atrocities, which are really atrocities, but they're occurring within a social context, even in a place like Minneapolis. It's not this individual guy that's significant. It's the whole structure, the police department, the city, the ruling class in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, so forth. And Marxists have to the extent that they can, have to broaden out the people's consciousness. You know, there's so much talk about justice for this Floyd and justice for so forth, and you can understand that's heartfelt, but it doesn't go anywhere unless it's put into a broader context, and that's the job of Marxists to do, because we want to get somewhere. Thank you.
Okay, let's have Mehmet, and then Raj, you have your hand up.
Yes.
So Mehmet, why don't you go first?
Okay, thanks. Guys, we have to be careful. I mean, there has been a murder in the hands of a police, and he was just about to get away with it until things broke up, okay? So there is a huge amount of anger, and this anger is not only for the latest killing. Latest killing is just what triggered it. The anger that we are seeing is coming from years and years of exploitation, the capitalism breaking down. It's not giving anything to anybody. So with this anger, it is normal that people try to take their anger with the storefronts, by burning Mercedeses, by graffiti on Wells Fargo Bank. There is, I'm not going to say I like it, but we know that what is behind it is the anger. Yes, now the ruling classes are trying to divide us by the peaceful and good demonstrators, and then there is the other violent ones. I'm just seeing that right now Antifa has been declared a terrorist organization. Trump just announced that. So what they're trying to do is divide us so that we don't work on this together. They keep on saying that it was the people who come for destruction came from the other states. If you look at it, this is happening everywhere. So are there people just crossing the state lines just to do destruction? No, this is not what it is. We are seeing the anger of people. I understand, and I agree with Elizar that you need a disciplined movement that maybe sometimes gets involved with clashes, but sometimes not. But lacking that, let's not attack the people who are showing their anger by saying they are the right wing. Maybe there are some right wingers. Maybe there are some, the racists in there trying to conjure up clashes. But we have to understand that there's legitimate anger out there. And unfortunately, the subject of this discussion, unfortunately, we don't have a mass organization that can actually channel this anger into something much better. I think, people can comment on that. Thanks so much.
Okay, I'm gonna ask Laura, if you don't mind, to go next. Raj, if you don't mind, yeah. I'm gonna move her up. And if you would unmute. Oh, there you are. Okay, Laura, I think we can hear you now.
Okay, I have no answers and no real questions either, but the terminology is so not related to the way people think. I mean, people don't think of themselves as, I don't believe, as workers or bourgeoisie. I mean, the bourgeoisie started out, I was just looking it up, as being the city as opposed to the rural. And now where the rural is more likely to be right-wing, and the cities are more likely to align with the principles, with the goals, the socialist sorts of goals. And it seems like, and then, in the black-white and the rich-poor, there is an oligarchy, there's a ruling class, and people don't relate to those terms very well either. Imperialism, people don't relate to those terms. I think the term that actually they related to was from the Occupy movement, which was 99% and 1%. We all pretty much know we are part of the 99%. We're not that 1%. And the 1% is ruling things. And so I don't know what we can do about that. But just the terminology, workers of the world unite. Most people don't, a lot of young people, don't have jobs. And jobs are not the be all and end all. We're all workers, whether or not we have jobs. Jobs sort of destroy work, because of the whole boss thing. And the other thing I wanted to say is I really wish we could make a huge distinction with people. They equate property destruction with violence and property destruction with terrorism. And I mean, again, going back to Occupy, whenever I would just ask people on the bus, well, what do you think about Occupy? Breaking windows over and over again, windows being broken was the foremost thing in people's minds. And destruction, property destruction, I don't agree with it either. That's not my thing to do, but it's not violence. Violence is, putting your knee on somebody's neck and killing them. Destruction, whether it's environmental, when people, Earth Firsters or Earth Liberation Front, that's destruction. And I really wish we could make a distinction about those for people as much as we can over.
Okay, I'm gonna, let's have Raj and then Gulden after that. Okay, Raj?
If Gulden wants to go ahead and make sure.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Let me, she's unmuted. So Gulden, if you'll go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Raj, for giving me your turn. Well, I just want to say something about the lootings and violence. If these were socialist protests, it wouldn't happen. Because the people who are protesting out there are not socialist, and because this society is a property grabbing oriented society, they are also the part of this society. I mean, they are grabbing property out there with the anger. Of course, it's driving all kinds of negative attentions to the movement, to the protest movement out there. Actually, we should not be saying that this kind of behavior cannot be condoned. And of course, we have to condone this kind of behavior because of negative connotations bringing to the movement. Well, property grabbing is, again, people are not conscious about how this movement is originated from. They are not looking at the police activities at this time because of the property originated of the consciousness. Everybody is looking at which windows are broken, what is looted out, and also they are showing African American store owner with the tears out there. All my lifetime work is gone, and these are really a negative propaganda against the woman. So I'm with the people that were condoning this kind of behavior. That's all my comments are.
Thank you. Raj, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I just want to come back to Octave's question. I think the American society, from my observation, I'm an immigrant since 1966, and I was in Chicago, and I saw Chicago burn and what happened in the late 60s. And the difference I observed between then and now is the American white society has moved on to accept others, whereas the power structure, so that now what we have is a structural racism, and in which the police, on behalf of the capitalist society, enforces that structural racism. That's why when Jean said there were a lot of people who are not Black, other people of other colors, people of color and people who are called white, they were part of this anger and demonstration. So it is different now than it was in the 60s and early 70s. I mean, began to change with the Vietnam War. So it's right now, I agree with Laura, this American system has become an oligarchic system. And notice the second thing that Jean said, what the mayor of Minneapolis did, he got scared by, I think, by Trump, and he began to call it race relations. And I totally disagree with that. It is not about race relations. It's about structural racism of the state, which represents the capitalist class. And the liberals have had nothing to offer, both to poor whites and the poor blacks. Blacks have been divided, split into a very small group, which have been co-opted by the Democratic Party. And this is Glenn Ford's critique. And the rest of them are not represented, whom Malcolm X really represented, although Martin Luther King changed himself and got into Poor People's Campaign, but then he was eliminated as soon as he spoke against American state, how it acts externally and internally, consistent. Same thing with Malcolm X. So I think this is a moment in which the uniting vast number of whites and poor whites and blacks is a necessity for the Marxist left movement. And one just quick comment on Laura's, the anarchist view of 1% against 99% is oversimplification. There's a whole coterie of people around the capitalist class, which I think is about 10%. So capitalist class is about 0.1 or 0.01%. And then there is this whole layer around them, not necessarily all the petty bourgeoisie, which is actually 25%. Part of the petty bourgeoisie is with them. So it's actually 9 against 1 is the division I see. Thank you.
Okay, other speakers? We did have one comment on chat. Somebody raised a desire for people to shift the discussion back to talking about some of the party-related topics that Richard brought up. Does anybody have a comment? I'm actually willing to, let's see if we can maybe get some back and forth here between people. It's very hard to do in the Zoom platform, but let's, so anybody want to make some comments? We don't have any hands raised right now. No comments? Well, let me throw a question. Go ahead.
This is Michael. This is Michael Kaufman.
Okay.
About parties, I would say that there was a discussion of the size of different parties. I think it's extremely significant that DSA has grown to 60,000 people. It is a big tent organization, but they're all socialist, even though quite a number of the leadership are Marxists explicitly, but they're also anarchists. And DSA has been very active throughout the country during these uprisings and rebellions. Unfortunately, DSA is an overwhelmingly white organization, and that is its weakness. And I'll stop there.
Other comments? Actually, Mehmet, if you want to unmute everybody and just let people.
Yeah,
oh, Jerry,
could you please unmute us? I can't speak.
Yeah,
Okay,
let me just say, was that Jerry or was it?
No, that's Nina. I can't talk. You can't hear me.
No,
okay, everybody okay with unmuting everybody?
And
yes.
If it gets out of control, we'll put it back on. But go ahead, Nina.
Okay, I'm muting everybody,
okay.
and I'm taking
So
my ears.
You're the
off.
dictator, Mehmet.
You're the dictator.
wait a minute. Unmute everybody. Just 1 minute. Yeah, it looks like everybody's unmuted. Go for it, guys. Go for it.
Okay, Nina, go ahead.
Yeah, I just haven't had a chance to speak because I've been muted the whole time, and I don't have any device on here on my phone that lets me raise my hand. But anyway, yeah, I mean, some of the anger that people feel, I've been writing this story, I guess I should talk about working in a very right-wing big corporation, and I have never seen such anger at management by people who are unorganized, as in this very I should say fairly right-wing company with a CEO who is from special operations, that is the Green Berets or something like that. And there is a lot of anger from white collar workers. The left, to me, has seemed to ignore white collar workers. There's only one union, which is Blue Cross, that ever tried to organize in the financial district white collar workers. And this, that's why I'm writing this story. It's the incredible, how should I say, oppression of white collar workers, and the incredible anger they have, that if ever were unleashed, it would really be something. So that's just another angle that I have here. And that's what I've been doing. I've been writing this very personalized story about what it was like to work for the right wing, actually in a big insurance company. So.
Okay, people have their hands raised, but go ahead and chime in. This is open discussion time. So Gene and Elazar, you both have your hands up.
Yeah, I'll speak.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you ready to hear, Elazar?
Yeah. It's not. I'm not going to call on people. Let's just go ahead and speak.
Okay. Well, I think it'd be good if you do. But let me just say this. Richard mentioned about the fundamental cleavage is class, and yes, so I don't dispute that. Lenin and the Comintern spent night and day for the first 3 Congresses trying to knock into the heads of the American Communist Party the fundamental racist architecture of America, and how the black question cannot simply be solved through the class question, that it takes a special extra treatment. Lenin was very important on this. And I actually lectured at Marxist-Leninist Library on this question of the role of the Comintern and Lenin, of course, in getting the American Communist Party to realize the primacy of the black question and racism built into the very architecture of American capitalism, different than European capitalism. Not that they're not racist, but it's a different recipe and it has to be fought in a different way. So I think that, first of all, our task is to regroup sections of the left who will work together in united fronts. That's task number 1. Number 2, the problem with the violence in these demonstrations, as I said to the young people, I forgot their names, they were wearing black masks in Oakland. I said, if you're doing the same thing that police provocateurs are doing, even if you're not one, doesn't that sound kind of stupid to you? If they're doing it too, that means you're doing something that fits into the palm of their hand. So that's the kind of approach we need. We need defense guards in all of our demonstrations to prevent this type of vandalism. It's not that we think propriety, that it's called violence. Even if it's not, we need to stop it to protect the growth of the movement. Those are fundamental tasks of revolutionary Leninists. I don't know what's crackling there. I hope it's not my phone.
Stop opening your throat, Lawson, John, with the speaker on.
Okay.
Well,
guys,
yeah, cut off their hands.
Can I say
Cut off
something
their
about
hands.
what Elazar just said? Because I really benefited from Elazar's comment some years ago here on the role of the Communist Party in reorienting the Communist Party USA and the International in reorienting, the socialists towards bringing a multiracial party into existence. And I think that's very important. And I thank Elazar for that. But beyond that, getting back to our topic here, I want to say for many years, even when we saw the Soviet Union being overthrown, I came up with the idea, my orientation is that Marx was right in the 19th century and Lenin was right in the 20th century. And our task for the 21st century is to do for Marxism-Leninism what Lenin did for Marxism. And that's to apply it to current situations And we're fortunate that Marx and Engels didn't just write a lot of books we need to treat as Bibles, but they created a method which is known as scientific socialism, the application of science to understand what's going on. And what's going on in socialism we have 100 years since Lenin died, and we need to use our analysis of those 100 years to inform our struggles at the present. So I will step back.
May I say something?
Yes, jump in.
Okay, so I think the question of the Black question or African American question seems to me is similar to the nationality question, although it is very different also. And a Communist Party has to have a position. I agree with the Elazar that the Black question has to be addressed. And the Black question is not only that of class oppression, but oppression as human beings, which is extreme, which we witness. So within the program, like Stalin wrote, the book on national question, one of the key things he did was he gave the 57% oppressed nationalities, there were different nationalities, certain rights that the Russians could not, which were the largest group, could not intervene into. So they said, collectively, you have power over us, we can't power over you. That's how they joined. So the Communist Party, whoever comes up with a formulation for the Blacks, that their rights are going to be the fundamental rights in certain way, no matter how large the white majority cannot overrule them on certain aspects, that's needed in a program that will include them, because there's a whole historical question here, and it is of such a enormous dimension. And I don't know enough about the history of Communist Party USA, but seems to me is an important thing, that there are certain rights that have to be inalienable. For example, any kind of killing of white police officer Black should automatically lead to a great investigation, prosecution without delay. Okay, if there was revolutionary justice, you know what would have happened? It would be the trial the next day, and the verdict carried out the following day. But here, I know what will happen. It'll first of all take a difficult time even to arrest the guy until everybody mobilized. Then the other three who were part of it were not arrested. Now I understand that they are also included. And then the lawyers will come in and it'll drag out and there will be hung jury, okay? So I can see that this is the bourgeois justice. And the Communist Party, whoever actually able to marshal this like a Leninist, would have to include this into their program like the Bolsheviks did on the national question.
Is anybody calling on anybody?
Yeah, go right ahead. It's open mic. Go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to say that I agree with both what Jean and Raj just said. That I believe that the United Front is part and parcel of revolutionary theory, and became that in the 1930s and 40s, and is still relevant to the 21st century. I think that we need a united front against racism, and a lot of people are saying that in different ways. You know, somebody was quoted yesterday saying it's not good enough to not be a racist. You have to be an anti-racist. You have to do something about it, whoever that might be, not only the people who are the most directly suffering from racism. It behooves us to read the history of the Communist Party in the 1930s and 40s. They built very large base in the South among African American people that is still resonates today. And they did so because they decided that to struggle among their own ranks to raise the issue in terms of what Lenin had raised about national minorities. And they actually said that there is a Black nation and with certain particular territory. And they did not mean that that nation only belonged only to people who were Black or came from former slaves. They defined that territory as the Black nation, including everybody who lived there. And that really went a long way within the ranks of the Communist Party nationally to raise the issue of racism as a priority issue, as a fundamental issue, and that, of course, went a long way for them to build their base, in addition to what they did on the ground to defend people against the Klan and to organize people in the South. It's a very important part of our history.
Nina, you're wrapping paper or something into your microphone.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Anybody want to chime in? It would be great if people would comment on each other's comments. We're trying an open discussion here a little more.
Yeah.
Anybody want to just go ahead and
Well,
speak?
could I get a little clearer definition? Because I remember the Communist Party saying that there would be, that they, ideally, that there should be part of the South that would be for Black people, which sounded a little bit like the Bantustans to me in a way. But could someone clarify more what they were meaning through that?
Anybody want to comment?
I think Sharon was quite clear that the argument that was being made was an all-inclusive argument. Here's this territory where we Black people have been most based, and we would like this to be a Black nation. I don't think it's nice. I think it's great that Sharon interpreted it as inclusive of everybody there.
Right, but I don't know if that's what they meant at the time. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I do. I know that's what they meant.
Well, you do. Okay.
Okay.
Hello.
Alazar, go ahead, jump in.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment unless someone who hasn't spoken wants to talk.
No, go right ahead. It's open mic. Go ahead.
Okay. What I think it's what Sharon said. Right now, in the section of history that we're in, I think what we need, though I think it should be decided in great part by the oppressed Black people themselves, is revolutionary integrationism, not some kind of liberal pap. But I don't think a separatism into a Black nation designated in the South is applicable anymore. So it's fine with me if that's what the Black masses decide they want, then we should give that critical support. Though I do believe that most Black workers want revolutionary integrationism, whether they call it that or not using that term. What they want is full equality. They want not to be Black while driving, have to worry about the very walking, jogging, looking at birds. They want a different structural type of society, and I think that's what we need to fight for. And I think that the program from the third period of the communist movement in the 30s is not necessarily applicable now, but I'm willing to step aside if it is decided by the Black masses themselves. So I just wanted to put that forward. I think that's a fighting slogan, revolutionary integrationism, not liberal pap, not kissing the behind, excuse my language, of the Democratic Party. In my day, in the workers' movement, they said the Republicans punch you in the face, the Democrats stab you in the back. And that's exactly how I look at the two parties of capitalism. Thank you very much.
This is Gary speaking.
Yeah, Gary, go ahead.
Yeah,
Gary.
I think that Sharon got it right in terms of exactly what the party came up with in the late 20s and early 30s. But I also want to add that after that policy was adopted by the Communist Party, there were two aspects of that program. One of them was the one that Sharon talked about a lot, about self-determination. But the other part was the struggle for democratic rights, through whether in the Black Belt or whether you were living in Black communities outside. And what happened was that the party got its most mileage in the 30s on the democratic struggles, whether it was blocking evictions in New York City and other major towns, whether it was defending the Scottsboro Brothers, whether it was organizing agricultural unions in the South. It was these things where the party grew. And one of the best books to discuss all this was written by a guy named Mark Solomon, who wrote a book called The Cry Was Unity.
Right.
The Cry,
Very
C-R-Y, was unity.
And I highly recommend. Chat?
Pardon? I actually throw it in. I actually threw it into the chat a few minutes ago.
Very good, Gary.
Well, I was not trying to say that same theory of a Black nation, the thesis of the Black nation, applies today. It's a historical reference, and it was before the mass migration of people out of the South to the North and West. And so I think unity and the struggle, the primacy or the priority of the struggle against racism is key right now, as Gary was saying.
May I say something, Raj? So I think the question, the Black question in the US for the Marxists is its equivalent in India is the Dalit question, okay? And next Sunday, we will have Abhinav Sinha, who will speak on two sessions. One, first with the historical development of that identity of Dalits and their class identity. And then the second one will come 2 weeks later. He's already acknowledged that he will be doing, he said it was very difficult circumstances, but he will send a write-up on it. So I think that would be another time to compare these two questions in that discussion next Sunday.
But I'd like to throw something else in here. It's kind of been referred to. I want us to get, we will be building revolution when people say, I don't want a job. I want a way to participate in production, in behavior, in a way that is satisfying, not only to me, but to the community being next door or around the world. A job is our enslavement, is the relationship that we have to capital and needs to go. The 8-hour day idea needs to go. It was run at great cost, but it was not the be all and end all. We need to say it if we're going to be able to advance revolutionary struggle. And that kind of revolutionary struggle precedes that overthrow of capitalism, as I was talking about earlier. We need to tell people we are not consumers. We're human beings. We are not workers. We're human beings. We want good quality lives, not as defined within the capitalist struggle, within the capitalist structure, within the imperialist structure. Somehow, people have to be relieved of the responsibility of calling for the capitalist structure to be what needs to be corrected. You and I know that it can't be. And you also know that I say that the schooling serves the same purpose, is to put us into this structure. And you could have all the revolutionary teachers in the classrooms you want, until we get rid of that classroom structure, that school bill, march in line to the classroom kind of behavior, we're not going to be able to talk about something called education until we become able to recognize that people have education from the time they're born, and that their education is not to be denied as having to be formulated into some alienating structure.
Okay.
Can I
This
raise
is
a question?
Elazar. Can I be?
Oh,
Am I heard? Is Elazar being heard?
yeah, go ahead.
Hello.
Yes,
Hello.
Elazar. Yes, we can hear
Yeah.
you. Can
And
you?
it's so
Yeah.
brief. I just want to make a brief comment what Raj said and others said that were very good. Maybe Lenin, I'm not sure, talked about the caste, C-A-S-T-E, oppression of blacks. But if not, that's the terminology. The Cubans made a revolution. They overthrew capitalism. People thought that the black question would be solved that way. Am I being heard or am I interrupting somebody?
No, go right
Hello?
ahead. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Elazar.
So it turned out in Cuba, though the revolution was extraordinary, that the blacks were still in an unequal position. First of all, the counter-revolutionary gusanos that fled to the United States were allowed to send packages to Cuba. But most of these people were white, so the blacks weren't getting any external help. So what's the name of that movie star? The black movie star who used to sing Deo.
Harry Belafonte.
Harry Belafonte played a very big role in Cuba, educating the cadre of the Communist Party of Cuba how essential it was to recognize the black caste oppression still continued in Cuba. And the same thing happened in the gay question also. And even it was taken up, was dealt with, and great progressive changes were made on it. So the question is not just solved by the class struggle. We must recognize the special oppression, the caste oppression. I think that's the words we now use in Marxist-Leninist terminology. And unfortunately, terminology is important. I'm through. Bye-bye.
I'd like to raise a quick question to just get feedback from people. One of the differences from certainly 100 years ago or even 40 years ago have been the changes in the U.S. working class in terms of the decline of industrial employment and unions. And I wanted to get people's thoughts about, I mean, this is really quite a different situation today compared to many of us even remember 30, 40 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Can people comment on how they think that might affect the course of politics and revolutionary social politics, communist politics?
Alan?
Yeah.
I almost want to ask, this is Gary, I almost want to ask you, you got a weekend to discuss this?
Well, you can throw out a few ideas. We've talked about a few big questions here today. I wouldn't mind if you want to.
This one coming at the end of near the end of our discussion.
I understand. Let's do a session on that. I think that would be a great idea.
Yeah.
If anybody has any quick ideas, please jump in. Okay.
I don't have one on that, but I just wanted to comment on Norma's formulation that we are not workers. We are workers.
Yes.
And work should be prime want of life. That's how you define life, is that you're able to work. I think she meant is not to be exploited, and I agree with her on that. And I think education needs to be radically reformulated, and I think that has to be done. But I think as Marxists, we know that working is our privilege. I mean, this is how you define life. That's all I want to say.
In what category then is enjoying smelling flowers? Is that bourgeois? The idea of making people accept that they're workers, that they're this is dehumanizing. Yes, of course we work. We have to get our bread somehow. Of course we work, but the point is that we are wide-ranging creatures, and not to be classified by a narrowing terminology. It does terrible things to the mind. Oh, well, I'm a worker. Okay, well, sure. And people who are 2 years old are not considered workers, but they are. They're part of the continuum. They do all kinds of things when they're 2 years old, or when they're 90 years old, and those are disregarded. They don't fall into the right category.
Can some of the people who haven't, anybody who hasn't spoken up,
yeah,
so far,
that's
please,
what we want to hear.
please jump in. Anybody, go ahead.
I just want to remark to Norma. It's true. We were smelling flowers long before there was class society. Period.
How about anybody who hasn't commented want to chime in? Last chance. We're getting near the end of the hour.
That's the place with everybody.
I would like to hear a presentation by Gary about humor and Marxism-Leninism. I think he'd be a hit.
I'd like to just note that both Marx and Engels and Lenin were agreed on the fact that we're not going to get a good communist society the day one after the revolution. Both insisted on a long historical period of the dictatorship of the proletariat to build the kind of conditions under which we can build the kind of society that Norma wants. I just wanted to say that. And also, I did put into the chat session there, that I know everybody is hankering to donate to the Marxist Library and our institute. And I did put the procedures there in terms of how to donate to the.
Gene, did you put the zip code of the library in? Because I would just like to mail in a check.
No, you should not. To do this, you don't mail.
I can't use PayPal. I use it for other things.
Yes, but there is Richard's address. Send it to Richard, not to the library. If you want to donate to the institute. If you want to
Richard, why don't you
that's a different matter.
Address that?
Richard's address is on the chat.
Yes, I don't know if Richard wants to say anything about that. Maybe
you're very eloquent, Gene, on that point.
Okay.
We're coming in. I wanted to thank Richard for
Do you think Richard makes the last words to summarize or to close up? Because he's spoken and then everybody else spoke. Maybe he'd like to just close up.
Well, I found the whole discussion, when in preparing this, I was worried about kicking off too much discussion, but we seem to have had a pretty good discussion. And so thank you, everybody.